Alaikum, everyone. We are back again with episode number 2, and inshallah, we'll keep going. Today's topic is history of Muslim is not that different from the Jews. And we are here with Miraj Sirajuddin. I call him Sheikh Saab, like in fact, I'm Sheikh, like last name Sheikh, but he's very knowledgeable. So alhamdulillah, let's get started. It's a very interesting topic.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem, amma ba'd. So today, inshallah, we'll be discussing this hadith of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he said, like, his Sahabi, the companion Abdullah bin Amar al-Aras, radiallahu anhu, he quoted Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as saying, my ummah meaning my people, the Muslims, will undergo and experience all those conditions which were suffered by the children of Israel in a manner of resemblance, in which a shoe of pair resembles the other shoes. Meaning, like, the similitude of the history of Muslims in comparison with the Jews. It's like, like you have a pair of shoes, if you kind of put them like at this angle like this, you cannot tell which one is right, which one is left, so like that. So, and we'll go through, like, so there are like
3 parts.
One is the history, the rise and fall of the Jews and the Muslims. And then the other thing is the similitude is the deviances, that led to their downfall and of the Jews, and then the deviances among the Muslims that led to the downfall of Muslims. So these are 2 things. And then, even though it's a lot of it, like, it's like a similar and same, like, whatever the correct practices were prevalent among Jews were also prevalent among the Muslims, and it's prevalent still. So that's another thing. And then we'll go through the first part of a rise and fall and the role played by the personalities among the Jews and among Muslims. So we'll go over that, inshallah. So let's.
And how many stages are there roughly?
So like the main stages are like 3 stages, like 3 rise and 3 fall, so far, and I think that's the end of it too. But then there are like small, ups and downs too. Like, but those are like in. Compared to the major 3, those are like not that big. They so we're not gonna, because there's like time constraint. We don't have, if you discuss all those nitty-gritty things, it's gonna take like days and days. So
sounds good. So inshallah, let's get started.
Yeah. So the Bani Israel, like, the Jews, their history actually starts with the Yaqub alayhi salam, the Jacob. And Yaqub alayhi salam had like, 12 children, if I remember correctly. And the Yusuf alayhi salam was the 11th, and his brother Binyamin was the 12th. So those 12 children, their descendants are basically are the people known as the Bani Israel. So we, the Yaqub Islam obviously was the son of Ishaq alayhi salam. Ishaq alayhi salam in turn was the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then Ibrahim alayhi salam had another wife named Hajar alayhi salam, or Hagar, and whose son Ishmael alayhi salam, from whom whose descendants are Arabs. And but the thing is, like, for 2,000 years among the descendants of Ismail salam, no prophet came, and the last prophet who did came was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And among the descendants of Ishaq alayhi salam, where the continuity of prophethood. You have the Yaqub alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam, and then later on Musa alayhi salam came among them, and then Harun alayhi salam and Dawud alayhi salam, and like many other prophets, like that came among them. So
So let's talk about first the battle, the first battle between it was the Jews, Battle of Jericho.
Yeah. So what happened was, like, the after the Bani Israel were saved from the Pharaoh, the Pharaoh, when the river Nile was separated, they were ordered to go fight. It was their first jihad, which were ordered to them, and fight against the I think his name was Jalut. Yeah, the Jalut, right? The Battle of Jericho. So because these were the people who were occupying Jerusalem at that time, and Jerusalem, is as known as the land of Ambiya, where many of the Ambiya came, and it's is known as the land of Ambiya. And so, because the Bani Israel were the rightful inheritor of that land, and at that time, because they were Muslim, right? So, but because they did not have the control over it, so the Allah Azza wa Jal ordered them to fight jihad and take over that land. But because the Bani Israel at that time were living under the oppressive rule of Pharaoh, so when people live under oppressive rule, they develop certain characteristics. The characteristics of cowardice, treachery, betrayal, and being selfish. And these are the characteristics you will find among any oppressed people, like because, and that's one of the main reason why they are being oppressed, because the oppressor, their main tactic is divide and rule, right? So they divide because they give favor to some people from the oppressed minority, and they put them in a higher position and a power. And just like in our time, you had like Barack Obama, and under Democrat rule, you will find like some Muslim wearing hijab, and in a position of like secretary and other like position. And then you would find they tend to be the most brutally and oppressive towards the other Muslim than the Muslim, then what you call the white establishment. So same thing, like among the Pharaoh establishment, you would find Qarun, who was from Bani Israel. He was wealthy. He was benefiting from the Pharaoh administration, so he was more oppressive and more critical of Bani Israel, and he refused to help the poor people from the among the Bani Israel, despite him being super wealthy. And he is said, like just the keys of his treasure were like several uh, uh, boxes full. So that's how wealthy he was. But despite being that, he was very stingy, very uh, like what they call arrogant and selfish. So same characters you find like among the for example in Britain, like in you whoever get to rule get to be a part of the British
Establishment.
administration. Yeah, like for example, what's her name? That lady who was the czar of the most pro-prevent policy, Sarah, I think. So she was the most critical and more oppressive towards Muslim than the white British establishment. So same thing. Anyway, but going back to the Pharaoh, so they so what happened? They refused. They said like, no, oh Musa, like you and your Allah go fight. We're gonna stay here. We're not gonna go fight. So they refused. So as a punishment, Allah Azza wa Jal make them wander in the wild desert for 40 years. And in that 40 years, Musa Islam passed away. But a new generation was born in the desert, and they had not witnessed slavery, and they did not live under oppressive rule. So they were free, right? They were courageous. They were not like their parents, who were coward, who were treacherous, who were what you call selfish. So these were like very different people, and change always come from youth. So wherever, for example, you would find and anywhere, like a change come is always led by youth. For example, the Hong Kong protest, like pro-democracy protest, which was against the Chinese mainland authority, were led by the youngsters. The young team, majority of them were in between the age of like 13 to 30, 32 years, right? So they were around that age, and they were leading the protest against the Chinese regime. And same thing you find, like who are the majority of the converts in either United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. You would find they tend to come from either, like in the United States, you'll find the majority of the converts are blacks or Hispanics. And from among the whites, you would find either the young whites or poor whites. You would find very rare, minute minority from the established, well-to-do white people who are working like 9 to 5 corporate jobs or working in like higher up positions. You would find like rare few white people accepting Islam. Why? Because they're benefiting from the status quo, so they don't want to change. So, and same thing you would find in Australia and New Zealand. The majority of the converts are like in Australia, the Aborigines, and in New Zealand is the Maori, the local people. So you'll find the same pattern, and that's why, like, when Muhammad sent a letter to Heracles, who was the king of the Roman Empire, and who was at that time in Damascus or in Syria. So to become Muslim and accept the authority of Muhammad, he inquired like who are the followers of Muhammad. So he was told the followers of Muhammad are the young people and the oppressed minorities of the Makkah. So he said, yeah, these are the followers of the Anbiya, because he was a learned man, so he knew who were the followers. So anyway, so the young people of the Bani Israel who were born in the Sinai desert, they were the one who took the Jerusalem. So in the Battle of Jericho. So the Battle of Jericho, like initially, like over 400,000 Bani Israelites, joined um, the what you call the battle first under the leadership of Joshua alayhi salam. But because they never fought before, so and then battle requires like discipline. You cannot be like doing like whatever you want to do. You have to be obedient. You have to be disciplined. You have to follow the order, no matter how much you despise that order. So the Joshua Salam gave them command, like we will be marching towards Jerusalem, but on the way we'll pass by a river, and when you get there, do not drink, and if you do drink, just drink like a handful of it. So out of over 400,000, like only 313 people uh, either did not drink, or if they did drink, they drink just bare minimum. So Joshua Islam said, like, only these 313 would join me in the Battle of Jericho. So what that tells you is, uh, like, we have like 1.7 billion people, right? So out of 1.7 billion people, the majority of them, if we to put them to test, they're gonna fail the test. And that's why you find, like, when in the hadith, which are prophecies about end time, it says, like, when the Imam Mahdi would emerge in the end time, out of 1.7 billion people, only 313 would give bayah to them. And what does that tell you? It tells you that the majority of the Muslims would just be like against him. They would be like making a statement like, we condemn this act, we don't, that's not Islam. we need to be living under the United Nations secular liberal order, because their brain was to them like, oh, the majority of Muslims don't even know for the ghusl. They don't even know the basics of prayer. How can you be calling for khilafah and calling about like establishing the Islamic world order and overthrowing the secular liberal world order, right? So, and then the other thing about this 313 who joined the Battle of Jericho from the Israelites is an interesting number. You would find the same number of people were in the Battle of Badr with Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and you would find the same number of 313 people who joined, like the Zaid when he stood up. This was during I think like after the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, like they like 70,000 people first came to join him, and out of 70,000, and they asked him a question like, what is your opinion about Muawiyah radiallahu anhu? So he gave the opinion according to the the Ahlul Sunnah, so they didn't like that opinion, and so they, out of 70,000, only 313 stayed with him, and the rest just flee. So that number 313 is a very interesting number. Like
and
this
that
shows,
example, it keeps falling from time to time.
yeah, it's keep happening like time to time. So yeah, so there's 313 join the Battle of Jericho, and they won that battle, and they took to Jerusalem. And after that, Allah Azza wa Jal gave this huge victory to the Muslim or the Bani Israel at that time. And that led to the powerful first rise of the Jews, and they established this like a very powerful kingdom, and whose first Khalifa, if we call, because they had like Anbiya. So the first Anbiya was Dawud alayhi salam, and then after Dawud alayhi salam it was Sulaiman alayhi salam, and so just like so they had like the three prophets, like Joshua alayhi salam, Dawud alayhi salam, and then Sulaiman alayhi salam, right? Three, okay. So just like among the Muslims, you had like three Khulafa: Abu Bakr, Omar, and Usman radiallahu anhu. And then just like after the death of Usman Ghani radiallahu anhu, Muslims were divided into the faction of Muawiyah radiallahu anhu and the faction of Ali radiallahu anhu. So same thing happened with the Jews. After the death of Sulaiman alayhi salam, they were divided in two kingdom, like so the southern kingdom of Israel and the northern kingdom of Israel. And the for example the okay, so they were like the I think and all three of them were working after the. So the 10 tribes of Israel refused to accept the king who was appointed after the death of Sulaiman was King Rehoboam. So they refused to accept his authority, right? So and then so they established like their separate kingdom, okay? So the I think the King Rehoboam like was ruling the southern kingdom of Judah, and then the other king was ruling the northern kingdom of Israel. But then what happened? They continued to exist, and they but then like as has happened like in human history cycle, that the moral decline, the corruption, the intellectual decline, it happened to them as well. So and it took like many years. It didn't happen like overnight, or it didn't happen like in few years. It took many years, and then when it led to what you call uh, the lowest level, then Allah sent as a punishment to them, and then I think the northern kingdom was first destroyed by the Assyrian, and then the southern kingdom continued to exist, and then uh, I think later on what you call the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, he came and he destroyed the southern kingdom, and he killed 133,000 or 150,000, if I remember correctly, 150,000 Jews in one day, and he took rest of I think 150,000 Jews as captives. So they lived in what is known as era of captivity, and that's where Uzair al-Islam came among them. And we have his story in Surah Kahf, where he knew that the city of Jerusalem would be reestablished. And then when he saw the Jerusalem is lying in ruins, so he said, like, how could Allah Azza wa Jal would ever restore this city which is lying in ruins? So Allah Azza wa Jal made him sleep for 100 years, and then when he woke up, his I think food was still fresh, but his donkey was basically
Skeleton.
yeah, it disappeared, like with the mud. So that was a sign to him that if Allah could bring life and keep the food fresh, and then make other thing disappear, then he is capable of like restoring the city. So he make the Jews to do the tawbah, the repentance. And then after that, then the Iranian king Khosrow, I think at that time, he attacked the Babylonian kingdom, and he destroyed the Babylonian kingdom, and he allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the city. And it is said like he also helped them financially, because they were living in an era of captivity, so they didn't have a whole lot of wealth, right? So anyway, and then that began the second rise. So we had like the first rise and first decline, right? The first rise was with the after the Battle of Jericho, and then you had like decline, where the Assyrians destroyed the northern kingdom, and then the Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the southern kingdom. And then now is the second rise. It began in 536 BC before Christ. It was under the leadership of this, as I mentioned, the Cyrus. He destroyed the Babylonian kingdom, and then he allowed the Jews to go and establish their kingdom in Jerusalem. And as some historians say, it was the kingdom was even bigger than the kingdom of Sulaiman Islam, but not because the Sulaiman Islam kingdom was uh, powerful in a way where he had the authority over jinns. Jinns are like invisible creature. They are like humans, but they're not. They're made of fire. They are not made of clay like we humans are. And they are invisible, and they are capable of like traveling at lightning speed among space. And they can see us, but we cannot see them. But they are, again, it's a whole different topic. Like you can communicate with them too. So Sulaiman Islam used to have authority over them too. So his kingdom was different, but in terms of the area he ruled, I think was not as big. But then when they established the second kingdom, the area they ruled was bigger than the area of the Sulaiman Islam.
So he had more authority, like over jinns, over birds.
Yes.
He knew magic. He used to collect it.
Yeah, he knew magic, but then in Islam we consider like magic to be like a kufr, it's not allowed. So
that's why he was commanded to collect the scrolls and all the magic
and burn it,
Yep.
So yeah, so he did that. And then what do you call yeah, and then when he passed away, some historians say, and then it is also in the other books where
eventually the Templars found his scrolls, but we'll go to that topic later on. But it is an interesting topic.
Yeah. So anyway, so going to the second rise, right? So that happened after they were freed from the Babylonian kingdom. So and then they established the second kingdom, in Israel, obviously, because that's their land, historical land. And then they continue to exist, and then same thing happened. Like the human history is full of this. You have the what they call hard times create strong men, and strong men creates like what you call easy life, and then that leads to the moral and intellectual decline, and that creates like weaker men, and weaker men create like hard times. So same thing. So after that, the what you call the moral corruption and intellectual decline started among the Bani Israel, and then eventually their kingdom was again destroyed, and this happened like after the Isa alayhi salam, and then the Titus Roman II destroyed Jerusalem, and he killed 133,000 Jews in one day, it is said, and he expelled the remaining 150,000 Jews, and they were not allowed to visit Jerusalem, let alone settle in Jerusalem. So that's how oppressive it was, and that's how brutal the punishment was for the Jews.
And Allah
And
subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded them, not to return.
yeah, like he as a punishment for their the rejection of Isa alayhi salam, and for their what you call arrogance, and is sticking to like the corrupt practices that were prevalent, and like one of them was they used to lend money on interest, usually. So anyway, and then what happened was they like, so this happened like before like soon after the Isa alayhi salam, which they claim that they put him on the cross, and but we Muslims obviously don't believe that. We think like Allah Azza wa Jalla took him alive, and that was a test for them. So anyway, so and then what happened was yeah, so they were not allowed to visit Jerusalem, and then things changed when Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, took Jerusalem from the Romans, and but the Romans, like as a condition, they because we Muslims took Jerusalem without fighting, right? There was like a siege, and Romans had like the predictions, and their scholars knew that this city would fall to Muslims, and but they knew a ruler of the Muslim would be very a simple man. He would not be like arrogant. So when the Muslim laid siege to Jerusalem, they did not see that sign, so they communicated that. So
And this was also our first rise of the Muslims, the first
this was
rise.
the first rise of the Muslim. Yes.
Yeah.
After, under the Khilafah, or the leadership of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh. So Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, as a condition, he said like, well, we'll not allow Jews to settle in Jerusalem, but we'll allow them to visit Jerusalem, because this is also their holy land. They we Muslims cannot stop the other, like the people of the book, from worshipping, practicing their religion. So Umar Khattab, like has give basically an exemption, and give them some what you call relief, basically, to come and visit their holy land. So they came, and then what happened? This was their second decline, and then they continue to stay in that state, like decline. But then what happened? Wherever Muslims rule, like for example in Spain, it is said like because in the one of the first prime minister of Israel, one of Ben Gurion, he said the golden era of our diaspora was Muslim Spain, meaning after Titus Roman II, when he destroyed Jerusalem and he expelled all the Jews, they spread out in all different lands, right? So some of them went into Europe, some of them went to India, some of them went to Morocco, Africa, all over the world. So the best time,
and most of them in modern day, they converted also to Judaism. I'm talking about the Khazars.
The Ashkenazi ones, yes. Yeah, the
Yes.
Ashkenazi Jew, from the present day, the Georgia and Ukraine part of the land. That's where the Khazarian kingdom was. Yeah. So, but no, but these Jews who were expelled were the what they call the Jews of the time of the Musa alayhi salam, and so they um wherever the Muslims rule, like for example in Spain, they had, like, they enjoyed like really good life. They were like they were scholars, and they became like, the wazir. They were able to have, like, the powerful positions under the Muslim sultans. So but like they were kind of like as acting as individual, right? So they were not like, they didn't have like any kingdom or like established rule of themselves. So they were basically working under other the rulers, right? As advisor, as a merchant, as a scholar, uh, as a businessman, whatever. So their third rise started where as a Zionist movement, and the first idea of like Zionism was circulated by Rabbi Zevi Hirsch in 1882. He circulated this idea, like, having like a Jewish state. But the thing is, like, this the third rise, is like a purely it was a purely secular movement. It wasn't like a religious movement like the first rise and the second rise that happened among the Jews, right? The first rise was under the leadership of the Joshua Islam, and he was a prophet, like the Nabi of Allah. And second, like, the Uzair alayhi salam, who was also the prophet of Allah. But the
So
third rise is completely different. It was
before we do the third rise, can you explain a little bit about the decline of Muslim? If we can relate history between them and us, we had a similar history also, and downfall also.
oh yeah. So our so as I said, like, our history and the history of the Jews are like similar, but there are some differences. For example, the first rise of the Jews did not happen like right after the Musa alayhi salam, because Musa alayhi salam was the first Nabi or the prophet of the Bani Israel, who was given a book of Allah, like the Torah, right? Before they didn't have the book, right? So they were just like as a, like any other community, but then they were given the book. So when Allah Azza wa Jal gave them order to go fight jihad, they refused. They did not fight. So during that time when they were like, wandering in the Sinai desert, the Musa alayhi salam passed away. So their first rise didn't happen right then. It happened like under the leadership of Joshua Islam. So, but the Muslims' first rise happened right in the time of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was alive, because the Sahaba, they did not, they said like, we're not gonna be like the Jews who refuse to fight. We're gonna fight, and then because of their sacrifice, Allah Azza wa Jalla give them authority over the land. Like Muslims, Muhammad was able to conquer Makkah, and he took, the Makkah, and he established the Sharia, the Khilafah, and then, the Muslims start to spread east and west. Muslims destroyed the Roman Empire and Persian Empire at the same time, and Muslims were able to conquer area all the way to Spain from present-day Saudi Arabia. And in the east, Muslims destroyed the Persian Empire. So Muslims took over the whole of Iran. Muslims took over Afghanistan, went as far as Central Asian countries, the present Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, all these areas in the eastern China, which is known as East Turkestan, like to the local people, and what China calls Xinjiang. And Muslims also conquer the present-day the Caucasus region, which is like known as Chechnya, Ingushetia, and all these regions. So Islam spread, like, the growth was like explosive, right? And the Islamic scholar like Nadwi, Maulana Nadwi, he wrote a book, what the world has lost after Islam, or I think hold on, let me see. I think it's called The World Before Islam, I think that's the name of the book. And he talked about like, the condition that were prevalent when Islam emerged on the horizon. And it was like same as like our time today, right? The oppressive rulers and unjust world order, because at the world order of that time was the loyalty to the tribe, just like the world order of today is the loyalty to the state, right? They call patriotism, like being loyal to nation, and they spread these. The government payroll scholars, they spread this fabricated hadith, love to your nation is part of iman, which is a fabricated hadith. It doesn't have anything to do, because if that was the case, then Muhammad did not have migrated to Medina. He would have stayed in Mecca. He migrated to Medina, and after Muhammad conquered Mecca, he did not settle in Mecca. He went back to Medina. So, but the people who to protect their power and to protect their interests, they just spread these kind of fabricated hadiths to pacify the masses, to continue their oppressive rule, right? So anyway, so yeah, so so Muslims, that was their first rise. So, and then like after Muhammad passed away, the Abu Bakr Siddiq became the Khalifa, and then Umar after Abu Bakr, then Usman after Umar, and then same thing, just like among the Jews after the death of Sulaiman Islam, they were divided into two groups,
Two camps.
two camps. Yeah, the same thing happened with the Muslims. You have like the faction of Ali Radiallahu Anh and the faction of Muawiyah Radiallahu Anh. So and then but then the they become united again, and then the Islam started to spread again. So then
So you're going towards the second rise of Islam.
yeah, but before that, we have to talk about the first decline of Muslims, right? So even though the Muslims were divided into the two groups, but Islam continued to spread. But then over few centuries, the moral decline, the intellectual decline, the corruption, the oppressive, the tyranny happened among Muslims too. Like for example, Muhammad bin Qasim, who was instrumental in spreading Islam to the present day Pakistan. It was known as Sindh at that time, or Hind. And he became so popular that, but people started to kind of like treat him as kind of like a godlike figure, because the people of India were like, they were idol worshippers, right? So if anything powerful or anything that bring relief to them, they would treat it as like a god-like figure, right? So, but the tyrant, the king, the tyrannical king, they cannot tolerate any figure like that, right? Because it's they consider it as a threat to their rule, right? So the Muslim ruler of that time, he recalled Muhammad bin Qasim from the Sindh region, and he have him stayed in the extreme heat, and he died due to that. So they were these tyrannical Muslim rulers, right? So, but then this continued to exist, and then the first decline or the destruction of Muslims happened, and it happened through the hand of crusaders. The crusaders came and they killed
Millions.
hundreds and millions of Muslims, and they took Jerusalem. And then because the other thing that is different with Muslim and in comparison to Jews is Jews were like one race, monolithic group of people, but Muslims are not. Muslims are multiracial, multicultural, multilingual group of people spread all over the world. So as a warning, because among the early group of Muslims were Arabs, right? The Muhammad was Arab, The Quran was revealed in Arabic, and the early group of Muslims were Arabic-speaking people. So, as a warning, Allah Azza wa Jalla says to them, "Wallahu al-ghaniyyu wa antumul fuqara wa in tatawallaw yastabdil qawman ghayrakum thumma la yakunu amsalakum." This is the last ayah of Surah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving a warning to the Muslim that if you turn away from the mission that we have given to you, that is, you are a representative, you are the Khalifa of Allah on earth. If you to misrepresent Islam with your actions, Allah Azza wa Jal will replace you with the people who will not be like you, and they will love Allah and Allah will love them. And that's what happened. The Arab Muslims lost Jerusalem, and but the Muslims who took back Jerusalem were not Arab. It was Salahuddin Ayyubi, who was a Kurdish Muslim. He was not an Arab. Some historians say he did not even speak Arabic. So he was a Kurdish. So he took Jerusalem back. So same thing. As the ayah says, if you to turn away from the mission we have given you, when to the wallow, yastabdil qawman ghayrakum thumma la yakunu amsalakum. Allah Azza wa Jalla will replace you with those who will not be like you. So that happened. So that was the first decline, and then after after that, then the second rise, the upward movement began among Muslims, and that was with, as I said, the Salahuddin Ayyubi, who defeated the Crusaders, and he took the Jerusalem back, and then again the same, the moral decline, the corruption, and oppression and tyrannical rule, and then the spread of infighting and grouping and assisting the kuffar against fellow Muslims and taking sides, with the kuffar to fight a few fellow Muslims. That happened.
And don't forget the Crusades, and again, notice it was the Romans, this time being Christian, who did most of the damage to us.
Yes, yeah, that's true. And it's just like, the Romans who destroyed the Jewish kingdom before, and they destroyed the Muslim, the Khilafah again. So with the second decline, the peak of it happened when the Mongols just started attacking the Muslim lands. They started the interesting fact here is that the destruction that happened to the Jewish kingdom were happened by the people who were living in close proximity to them. For example, the Assyrians were living just north of the northern kingdom of Israel, right? And the Babylonian kingdom was also not far. It was just Iraq, right? And Iraq is not far from Bilad al-Sham, and Jerusalem is very close. But with the Muslims, the people who came to destroy Muslims, they came from far away, like the Mongols, right? They came all the way from Mongolia, and they started taking lands from Central Asia to Iran to Iraq, and so they went all the way to be the Sham.
And Muslims, they knew about this, the incoming invasion, but they did nothing.
Yeah, they did nothing. They were negligent. They remained busy with the silly arguments, and then
collecting gold,
and hoarding golds and diamonds and jewelry, and where the masses were extremely poor, and the rulers and the elite class were extremely wealthy.
And same thing is happening right now.
Yeah, same thing is happening. You have the extreme wealth in UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and then you have the extreme poverty in Afghanistan, in Sham, in Egypt, and in much of the Muslim land you see the extreme poverty, and then you have the extreme wealth centered in the hands of few people who serve and protect the Western colonial interest. So same thing. So the Mongols destroyed the Muslim lands, and they kill Khalifa Mustasim Billah, and but then then a strange thing happened to them, and this never happened before, where the um, the invader embraced the religion and culture of the conquered people. So the Mongols became Muslim, and they not only became Muslim, they started to become a vanguard of Islam. So you find, like, the empire, like the many empires emerged from them. The Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and many other, like, small
So
empires.
from 12th century onwards, up until the 17th, 18th century
18th
decline
century.
of the Mughal Empire.
Yeah. So they become, the vanguard of Islam and Muslims. So that happened, and this never happened before in history of mankind. And it's like, the phenomena of Islam is very amazing. And the more you read about it, the more you're like amazed, and like, the hidayah, like, of Allah Azza wa Jalla is like an amazing thing, and he give guidance to whoever he wills, and he misguide to whomever who wills. And I was reading one Pew poll about the Muslims in America, where 20% of Muslims, they don't really believe in God, the the children of the immigrants here, because they don't have like that attachment, the emotional connection with Islam, like their parents did. So there were 20% of Muslims were like that. But then the the converts who replace those 20%, like, who don't believe in God, are 20%. So you have like the 20% born Muslims who don't feel like any kind of emotional connection with Islam, and who are like kind of agnostic or atheist. And then you have like 20% converts
So
who
I see
replace
where you're
that
going
number.
with that. It's always, like what Allah has promised, that He will replace
وإن
if someone.
تتولوا يستبدل
Yes.
قوما غيركم ثم لا يكونوا أمثالكم.
Yeah.
Same thing, and it's happening, and it's repeated over and over. Like, and you would find, like, whenever like Muslims become like heedless and quarrelsome and like argumentative, and leave the command of Allah Azza wa Jalla and become like selective, they follow just the rituals of Islam, and they ignore the jihad fi sabilillah. They ignore the obligation of establishing Sharia and establishing Khilafah. Allah Azza wa Jalla replaced them with other group of people. A lot of time it's converts who first kill the Muslim in large number, and then they become Muslim, and then they establish Khilafah and the Sharia of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And that's amazing. I mean, and that's the stage we Muslims are right now. So yeah, so that's the second rise, and then we uh, we are talking about now the end, right? Because like we are all living in the end of time. So before we go to the third upward movement that started among Muslims, let's go talk about a little bit about the third upward movement among the Jews, and that is the Zionism. It was the Rabbi Zevi Hirsch who floated the idea of Zionism, and then it was taken over by the Jewish banker like Theodore Hulse and many other, the prominent bankers, and they you know established some guidelines, and they said, like, they what they wanted to achieve. And everything since then, like, when the first conference of Zionism that happened in the city of Basel, Switzerland, it was originally scheduled like to happen in Frankfurt, Germany, because that's where a lot of the Jewish bankers were based at. But because a lot of the Jews were benefiting from this status quo, and they were living a lavish life, and they don't wanted to uh, they don't like the idea of Zionism, just like the Muslims of today living in the West and in, like, in other parts of the world who are benefiting from status quo. They don't like the idea of Khilafah, of having to overthrow the secular liberal UN based world order and establish Khilafah, because they know That means a lot of fighting, a lot of suffering, a lot of bloodshed of the Muslims. So same thing, the Jews who were living in the in Germany, in much of Europe, they don't want it to have to be forced to migrate to Jerusalem, right? So that's why it is said, allegedly by uh, the Israel-based journalist named Max Blumenthal. He said, he revealed this, that Tudor Hulse in his personal diary wrote that it is essential the suffering of Jews becomes so severe in Europe that it becomes intolerable, and they would have no choice but to leave Europe and migrate to Jerusalem. And our best friends will be anti-Semites, the Nazis of Germany and Nazis of Poland, Ukraine, and other places. So, and it's documented. Like for example, in a book, like I think it's called "The Blood Never Run Dry." I think is the name of the book. And
I just want to stop you there and just point out something similar is happening right now in Ukraine, where Israel is supporting the neo-Nazis over there, especially I forgot the brigade's name, like they're essentially neo-Nazis.
Azov battalion, yeah.
Yep.
So they finance these bankers, because running an election in a democracy is not like a what do you call a street guy's job. You need a lot of funding, you need constant funding, and it is said, it is very well documented, the Jewish bankers finance the Hitler's elections. And he came to power, and the goal was like the suffering of Jews become so severe that they would flee Europe to Israel. And it is understandable, because let's say you and I are living in the United States, we have a house, we have a car, and if you ask me or you, like, okay, go to Afghanistan or go to Syria, or other place where Muslims are under oppression, they are under sanctions, the living conditions are horrible, and there's no clean water, there's no, like what do you call a covered toilet, you have like one toilet for like 10, 15 people. We're not gonna go. I'm like, oh no, I'm not going. The only way you would go is if your life becomes so miserable and so intolerable that you cannot bear it. You go like, anything but here is fine with me. So that's why this whole Holocaust thing happened. That was basically to pave the way for the well-to-do Jews living in Europe to be able to go to Israel, which was surrounded by hostile Arabs who hated, and does not like the presence of Jews. I mean, they like the presence of Jews so long as they're visitors, but not if they come and take over their land. Like for example, this Jewish organization named Aragon, which went on to become the core of IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. They were like militant organization. They were involved in like a lot of bloodshed, like bombing,
terrorism.
Terrorism, and it's very well documented. They even bombed like a lot of British interests too. They were investigated, but it's all part of history and is very well known. So same thing happened, right? So that was their third rise, and this is their final destiny. And they believe like they are living in end time, just like we Muslims. And so our third upward movement after this colonialism started right after these what do you call post-colonial era. So all these Islamic upward movement emerged at the same time. So you had in subcontinent Jamaat Islami, in Europe, well, you have like Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and all these movements, they they emerge at the same time, and you have like I think
A revival of Islam, people
yeah,
thinking, Allama Iqbal.
philosophy,
Uh,
Maulana Maududi, Sayyid
yep.
Qutb, they all emerged at the same time, and the whole goal was to establish Islam as a social, political, economic, and justice system, not Islam just as a ritual. Like, you have masjid, you go pray 5 times a day, you eat halal food, you go Hajj, and when you die, instead of your uh, like your body burned, your body is buried, with the rituals, and then you marry, you do nikah. So just few rituals, right? So that's all that is left of Islam. The Islam as a social, political, economic, and justice system is like absence from the public spheres for like almost 100 years. The 1924 when the Khilafah was officially established, but it was, I mean, demolished, and but it was demolished way before, but it was still symbolically existent. But that's gone. But then you have all these, the post Khilafah, the Muslims, like the scholars and muftis whose sole focus is just about like the fiqh of like wudu, fiqh of ghusl, fiqh of divorce, fiqh of marriage. That's all they discuss. Their entire emphasis is just on that. They don't talk about Islam as a social party economic system. So it was these Islamic revival groups, like the Jamaat Islami, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, all these groups, they emerge and they say, like, we need to go back and establish our system, the Islamic system. So, but then what they did was they did not took the revival idea from the Islam or the Islamic history, but they adopted this idea of like electoral politics, like, so you have the Muslim Brotherhood participating in elections, and you have the Jamaat Islami participating in elections, and same thing in Indonesia and Malaysia, the Islamic parties over there, they participate in elections. But then over time, because in electoral politics, like you have this like blame game, like calling names and insulting each other, and then corruption, all that happen, and then that destroys the whole movement itself. So, and that's what happened to Muslim Brotherhood in the Arab world. That's what happened to Jamaat Islami, which basically kind of like doesn't even exist. Like
No, it
rather
just
than just
disappeared.
slogans, yeah, rather than slogan, because their last charismatic leader of Jamaat Islami was Qazi Hussein Ahmad, and after that, Jamaat Islami is basically like just exists on the paper other than few symbols, and they don't even call like even their slogan right now, like Islam is the solution. It's gone. They don't even call that anymore because it's just that politics has just disappeared now. And then, but then what happened was the jihadi groups emerged. You have the Al Qaeda, Al Shabaab. You have the what you call the Islamic group for combat and preaching in Algeria, in Tunisia. They all emerged, and then they did not embrace this idea of like what you call electoral politics at all. They say like, well, the only way the Islam can come is through jihad, and they become successful because as a like what do you call the oppressive colonial policies the West have adopted towards the Muslim Brotherhood and towards, for example, Muhammad Morsi, who won election by a huge majority in Egypt. He was overthrown by uh, Western like trained military generals of Egypt who got their training at the Sandhurst Military Academy in England, and
Sissy.
he was the subordinate of Sisi.
Oh, okay.
He had the training at the Sandhurst Military Academy in England, and he played an instrumental role in overthrowing Sisi. And after the Sisi was overthrown, he was put in jail. He died in jail, and like the West talk about like the rule of law, the rule of democracy, all that. And when Sisi was overthrown, no sanction was put in place against Egypt, and the regime of Sisi was like recognized immediately, unlike the Taliban who took over Afghanistan. They are not recognized by nobody.
No one.
They say they did not come through election. Oh well, Sisi did not come through election, but because Sisi is protecting the Western interests and he is friend with Israel, so he's recognized immediately. But whereas Taliban, they are of like no interest to the Western powers, so they are put under sanctions. And they talk about like, oh, they're against the girls' education, they're against human rights and all that. So what about what the rights of those who were sent to Guantanamo Bay, who are there are still close to 38 prisoners in Guantanamo Bay who are languishing there without any trial, without any due process. But nobody talks about that. But the CIA-backed militia who carried out like the horrendous crime in Afghanistan by militia the what they call
Overnight raids and
Post Protection Force KPF and the NDS 01, 02, 03 units. They carried out the worst imaginable human rights violations, and nobody talks about that. And then Mike Pompeo even threaten the ICC from to that if they try to open a investigation case against the CIA or American military force, he's gonna prosecute them, and he's gonna you know uh, what do you call take action against ICC. So anyway, so they the jihadi groups, the like a lot of the Muslim masses are gravitated towards them because they see the hypocrisy of the West, because they are like disappointed with the electoral politics, because they see like they're not gonna go anywhere because the West does not recognize the Islamist political parties. Like that's what happened in Algeria when they won election. The secular military of Algeria, they overthrow the Islamist political party, and that's what happened to the Muslim Brotherhood, like with Muhammad Mursi. And then so the Muslims see like the only way you can establish Islam is through jihad, through military means, because the West only understand for that's what the majority of Muslims think, and that's why you find the Muslims have basically gone away from electoral politics. So the slogan of the Islam is the solution from the Muslim electoral political parties have disappeared from the horizon. So now the only way Muslims see you can restore Khilafah in the Sharia is through jihad, and that's where we are at now.
Well, thank you. That's quite interesting, and as we can see, what's going on in current politics. May Allah help us.
Yeah, I mean, as of we these are very interesting times we are living in right now, and we see the war on terror has just ended, and the West is right now focused on the Russia. But as Allah says, in what you call Surah Baqarah, ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض ولكن الله ذو فضل على العالمين. If it wasn't for Allah that He check one group of tyrannical people by means or by the might of other group of people, there would have been corruption on the land. So that's what is happening, right? Because the Muslims, we are very weak, right? We are considered as what they call a third grade military power, so we are not in no way, even though Turkey is bragging about the Bayraktar TBT drone, but Bayraktar TBT drone is operating in an environment where the what you call the EW system, the electronic warfare system, is not that effective, right? But if Turkey's Bayraktar drone is to compete with Western, I think electronic warfare system, I think it just stand no chance. So our military power is no match to the Western power. So with the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, eventually the West will have to be dragon, and then they will destroy each other's might, and that will allow Muslims to establish their authority, and that's what we are seeing right now. Because you see, there's a like talk of like insurgency emerging in Central Asia, in Chechnya, and other places, right? And even in Africa, because Africa is a huge importer of wheat from Ukraine and Russia, and there are like talks of like
Food shortages.
food shortages, and the Western-backed government being overthrown, and that's what we see, like in Mali, in Somalia, and other places. So, and if like my sheikh used to say, if Allah Azza wa Jalla wants something to happen, He will create the means for it. So these two oppressive pharaonic powers are fighting each other, and in the process, they are destroying each other's military might, and that's what happened. Like the Pentagon just assessed that Russia have lost a lot of firepower, and it just in the report just today that over 40,000 Russian soldiers have lost, and when they say lost, they are including over 14,000 killed,
Killed.
and then rest either
Uh,
injured or captured
uh,
as prisoners. So yeah, that's where we are at now. And then this is like, inshallah lead to Muslims establishing their rule as Islamic world order, because the hadith says like, the Muhammad Sallallahu said like Khilafah will remain with you so long as Allah wills, and then Allah will take it away, meaning of Muhammad Sallallahu will depart from this world. And then there will be Khilafah ala minhaj an-nubuwah, meaning there will be Khilafah under the footsteps, or following the footsteps of Muhammad Sallallahu, which was the rule of Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, and Ali radiallahu anhu. And then Muhammad Sallallahu say like it will remain so long as Allah wills, and then Allah will take it away, and then there will be uh, 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 what you call the oppressive kingdoms, Mulkan Azam, then it will remain so long as Allah will. These the rules of Banu Abbas, Banu Umayyah, these were like oppressive Muslim rulers, and Allah, Muhammad like it will remain so long as Allah will, then Allah will take it away. And then there will be Mulkan Jabri, and meaning the slavery rule, like you become like kind of like helpless when the colonials came, the French, the British, the Dutch, and the French who colonized the Muslim part of the world. And Muhammad said like it will remain so long as Allah wills, and then Allah will take it away, and then there will be Khilaf al-Minhaj an-Nubuwah. So the colonialism, the direct colonialism ended, but the indirect colonialism still exists, because when the British, the French, the Dutch, and the Spanish, when they colonized the third world country, they did not leave or did not give the independence to third world countries until they make sure they put in place a
they're
group of
puppets.
people, who think like them, who talk like them, who act like them, and who stay there to protect their interests.
And that's what we have been seeing past 200 years
Yeah,
up until now.
actually like 70, 80 years, because the post-colonial era basically began after World War II. Before that it wasn't that, so it's like less than 100 years. So, but it's coming to an end right now, and we see like there's a like mass awareness, and then this conflict that's taking place in Europe is actually gonna be a final nail in the coffin of the secular liberal world order, inshallah.
So, final thoughts on what's going on in Pakistan. I know in 2 days, Friday, there's a major vote going on for Imran Khan, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but I wanted to ask you about this.
Well, I mean, they what do you call there are like a lot of speculation. I mean, like I saw one guy who is like kind of connected to the intelligence, and he posted that the Imran Khan will be overthrown, and some symbolic religious figure like the Maulana Fazlur Rahman will put in place, and he will basically allow the like the Taliban sympathetic masses in Pakistan to put some some Sharia laws in place, like an overthrow the secular, or like a camouflage or the secular cover that Pakistan society have right now. But we will know by the end of Ramadan, what's gonna happen. But I think by then, a lot would have been changed by now. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Jazakallah khair.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
So we'll end today's session right over here. Again, you can find us on Facebook, on YouTube. We'll have the links on the bottom. Please leave us a comment, and we'll be back next week, same day. Thank you, Miraj. Very interesting, very good topic. And we went over time, but I kind of like it. We covered lots of things.
Yeah. All right. Inshallah. See you next week. Right.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam.